Good evening. Thank you, Commissioner, for those kind words. And above all, before we start in the presentation, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that staff has been tremendous. Terry's crew has been unbelievable with responsiveness to product needs, materials, all sorts of things. Tremendous effort from them. I'd also like to acknowledge the school board and the school for hosting us tonight. I know it's a bit of a cumbersome thing since we're still kids here at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So, but we managed as we have before. So thank you again for your efforts. Now, I'd like to briefly introduce some of the team members that we have here tonight. We have Glenn with Biome. He's our biologist extraordinaire. We have Lynn, our economic metrics expert. We have the boys from Alta, who are the traffic engineers and traffic experts. And we have Frank Imbruglia from CPH. I'm with CPH, Director of Land Planning Services, and co-planning lead on this project. And we also have the folks from Sigma. Where are these? There you go. And Sigma is a local engineering firm who's partnered with us to go after this project. So, last time we were here, not in this particular location, it was December, mid-December. It wasn't quite as cold as it is now. But that was a fun session. Those were the fun workshops that we had, basically crayons and bumwad paper till we could start designing some stuff and getting some ideas down. We also had survey information that we took from the participants. So with all that information, I think we've begun to establish a basic groundwork for producing the plan itself. So tonight's presentation is not as exciting as the last one because what we're doing is we're producing some very general information, as I mentioned before, which is really interesting as we start formulating the plan for the Beulah master plan area. So we'll go to the first slide. Of course, obviously, our study area. This is workshop number 3. Funding, always have to recognize the funding as well as the commissioner. Here's the project design team. Master plan goals, which we enumerated last time, fairly self-explanatory. The key to this, the plan, as the commissioner has alluded since the beginning of the project, is that we want this to be an implementable plan. We start with the low-hanging fruit. Things are easily discernible, identifiable, and more importantly, funded. So we can start making shape of this particular plan. Next. Schedule. We are the last day of February. And then in March will be more design. We'll go into the design of the project, and we'll come back and visit y'all towards the end of April, where we'll present some specific design elements for each district within the study area, and culminating in July. Once again, we're reinforcing the critical aspect of the plan itself, and that is citizen participation. Workshops, we have a website, the questionnaires, project updates, and of course, the consulting team and county staff are readily available for any inquiries and comments and any insights to the plan itself. We welcome that. Okay, let's go to, and I'm not going to read this, obviously, not to bore you to death here, but these are some of the basic results of the surveys that we conducted last time. And some of them are fairly obvious, such as the 37% of the folks that responded dislike traffic. That's fairly standard nowadays anywhere in the state of Florida. So. But here's a key one. 46% of the respondents would prefer to maintain a rural community. And I think that's key. That's the heart that makes us an extremely unique study area. Yeah, we have major highways bisecting the study area, but yet it remains very rural. You see gorgeous country roads. You see great canopies, tree canopies outside within the area itself. And you have green areas. That is, obviously they're private property mostly, but that sort of starts framing what we're talking about here. We have little accent points or marks of urbanism or urban life, those being the major highways and along the intersections. You have concentrations of retail, office uses, residential. That's natural. That's what happens with development. But yet you start drawing away from those intersections and you start getting into the rural field. So I think one of the things that we've noticed is that we have concentrations of urban development, and then we go back to the rural areas. So that's something that I think we need to preserve in the plan itself. Next.
Javier, can I just ask you?
The surveys. Obviously, congestion is an overriding theme. The residents would like to see restaurants, post office, parks, playgrounds, multi-use trails, paths, and very important, EMS, fire, and police departments. I think part of the elements that make a great community are basically stated right there. And obviously, the roadway improvements, critical at intersection. And in order to control growth, we have to have proper network of roadways to serve those residents, future residents. Next. These are the findings from the DOT exercise. I think from what I was able to gather, I think that was the most enjoyable exercise that the folks participated in. Fairly self-evident. We go back to open space and connectivity and walking paths, lack thereof. Again, the rural atmosphere, the dislike of traditional strip centers, walkable environment. So you start seeing these themes becoming more and more obvious in the responses. Outdoor recreational areas, walking paths, civil service complexes, and a dislike for industrial uses and tightly oriented building form, which I'm not quite sure what that means. And unfortunately, whoever gave that answer, several people did not put their names. So I would like to know exactly what that means, tightly oriented building form. It's that buildings that are close to one another, or they look alike. Those are these things. So I think there's some room there for interpretation. Next, infrastructure. What is infrastructure? With infrastructure, what we mean, water, sewer services, a highway system, roadway system that serves the community, parks, civic spaces, neighborhood centers. It's kind of contradictory. Spaces that create great congestion are disliked by the community. A neighborhood center, by its nature, is a people gathering place. So I think it's more in how it's approached and how it's designed. So to decrease that level of congestion, traffic comes into play, building placement, things of that nature. Next. Again, so we see a theme here. Transportation, street trees, a dislike of highways, landscaping. One of the things that today when we flew up from Orlando, we had the opportunity to tour the study area again, and it hit us right in the face, the fact that most subdivisions don't have sidewalks and don't have street trees or lot trees. Typically, at a minimum, you would have one tree planted in your front setback. That's standard procedure in most codes in the United States, especially in Florida. And also sidewalks. There's one subdivision, I don't recall the name of the subdivision, it's being built by two nationally recognized builders. I forget their names. Actually, I won't mention their names. The newer portion of the subdivision has sidewalks. The older portion of the subdivision does not. So it's like, wait a minute, what? And there are no connections to the main road. I believe the subdivision is off Beulah Road. And there's no connection to Beulah Road, but Beulah Road at that location does not have sidewalks. So, that's something, again, pedestrian mobility needs and connectivity needs to be underscored heavily in this plan. And also street trees. Neither one of those subdivisions that we visited had any street trees. And some of the streets had street lighting. So again, this is something that we'll bring up, and we'll make recommendations of existing code to allow for those things. This is the district overview. So based on the information that we obtained from the last two workshops, plus information that we've obtained from studying the various reports that have been handed to us before by staff, we sat down And we started thinking, okay, how are we going to approach this? Because we have very unique areas within the 30,000 acres. To the west, we have the Perdido River and a very important watershed that needs to be protected and has conservation land use designation. So as we move from left to right, we start seeing an increase in the degree of development by, as indicated in this aerial photograph. As you can see, we have the Perdido River water basin, and then we start getting into some rural areas, some agricultural uses, and then we start moving towards the east a bit more, and then we start getting into the main roads and where the heavily concentrated development occurs. So we decided, based on the land use designations mostly, to divide the study area into these districts. So the next thing that happened was we said, okay, so now that we've identified the districts based on basically the land use, future land use and existing land use on the site, let's make those districts. So each district is fairly unique in its characteristics and zoning and the availability of utilities, housing stock, and things of that nature. So we've created, as you can see on these, on this side to my right, these boards depict. If you can bring one up, Frank, if you could. Okay, that delineates District A. Next. All right, so this is some of the metrics that we've identified for District A. Rougher area, vacant land available. That's very important because we use that as a basis to determine potential population growth within the district. Population as of today or last year is 163. Population as determined by our economic expert is 172. So it's not a lot of room for growth as far as population growth. But one of the things that we found very interesting is that the area that District A is mostly has a land use designation of conservation. And the county's conservation element in the comprehensive plan prohibits new residential units. So that in and of itself is the benchmark for no growth to occur. Well, however, that brings up other opportunities. What can we do in a no-growth area? No additional new units. In any event, so as we see a negative, that no new future growth or new residential units, we see a great opportunity for preservation. Conservation means passive recreation within the study area. That's in essence what we did with every single district. Every district is unique. Let's go to B. Here's opportunities. Recreation, conservation, watershed protection, limited new residential land uses to no more than 2 dwelling units per acre in certain areas. And then we go on to the constraints. Conservation, wetlands, the land use designation prohibits new residential uses, floodplain, and we have limited central potable water and sewer sources, which is key to density and new development. B is as we're going from west to east, we have B. B has unique characteristics. Again, you can see them there, delineated. We experience, based on the population projections, an actual decrease in population. And Lynn can address that as her segment of the presentation comes up. So again, as these boards, I will not bore you with going through all these, but these boards explain exactly and depict the characteristics that are unique to each individual design planning district within itself. Let's go to the next one, Frank. We have opportunities and constraints. Let's go to C. C is the middle one. And we have area of vacant land available. And again, the vacant land available consists of vacant land, obviously, but also land that is undeveloped. That includes land that is wetlands, land that is public use as well. So it's a broad gross acreage calculation. But this particular district, we are experiencing some growth there, less than 1,000. Based on the models that Lynn will deal with later on. So we move on to District C, opportunities and constraints, major roads. And this is the key. the opportunities and constraints in coming up with design elements for each individual district. D is further east. And this is a particular district that experiences the highest level of increase in population growth. Why is that? Many aspects, because it's transportation corridor going north-south, tying into I-10. We have a diversity of uses. We have a great transportation system that is constrained in certain areas, and the Alta guys are going to address some of those things. Opportunities and constraint. Great opportunities. District E. District E basically encompasses the Pine Forest Road corridor, north-south. And we believe that that particular corridor needs some tender loving care. We believe that that will remain the commercial spine of the district, of the entire Beulah Master Plan. Not necessarily, is it Beulah Road? No, it goes east-west. 9 Mile, thank you. Not necessarily that road. We see 9 Mile Road as almost a means to get to the west side of the study area, whereas the activity occurs based on our study of the area along the Pine Forest Drive Road. Constraints are basically the same throughout: wetlands, land availability, traffic, and congestion, which is huge. And District F is the area we've identified for the future interchange of I-10. We know that I-10, that interchange is not funded as of yet. However, proper planning at this stage of the game, prior to it being funded, is critical relative to how we address protecting the existing residential neighborhoods along there, and what potential type of growth needs to occur there. Is it industrial? Is it office warehouse? And things of that. Those are the things that we'll be looking at. And also, we're all concerned as to what happens north of I-10, not just exclusive to our site. So we'll be looking at that particular aspect of it as well. It's fairly straightforward. Is that all the presentation? Okay. So a couple of things that we did not include in the PowerPoint presentation is some of the boards that we have on this side of the room. So we had, starting from left to right, we have transportation issues that have been identified. The next board, we have the population numbers that Lynn will explain her magic as to how she arrived to this. To those numbers. And then from there on, we have land use, zoning, vacant land use, and inventory inputs. So we have a watershed map that shows the 100-year floodplain, wetlands, and how that impacts potential growth. So the bottom line from today's meeting is information. We've gathered a tremendous amount of data relative to growth, opportunities to accommodate future growth. Now, Lynn's economic statement or population projections project maybe about up to 10,000 people, extra inhabitants in the study area by 2045. However, based on our vacant land use inventory, we've been able to surmise that projected population will be well accommodated within the vacant land that's available, but also it will be able to accommodate substantially more people because we have land availability. Now, that poses an issue because that more people means more traffic, constraints on public services, and things of that nature. However, it also poses a great opportunity for us to plan, as the commissioner mentioned earlier, the ability for us to plan for that future growth, whether it's 10,000 people by 2045 or 25,000 people increment by 2045. Now is the time to look at the intersections, look at the roads, look at the water and sewer availability, look at the open space, trails, identification of gathering places, activity zones, connectivity. Those are the things that will make a difference, and that will result, as the commissioner alluded to earlier when I spoke to him, is in smart growth. So the bottom line, the findings from this report this master plan and the implementation measures we believe will lead towards smart growth in how we handle that population increment. So now I'd like to turn it over to the Alta guys, and then they will briefly go over, without getting too technical, to how to address transportation and their findings. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Javier. I'm Eric. This is Richard from Alta. Richard's a transportation engineer. I'm a transportation planner. One thing that I think is really interesting and just it's really great about what we're trying to do here is there's different disciplines that are all informing each other, and we're working together. We have our own sort of internal discipline objective, but we have to learn from one another as we're putting this plan together. For example, so we developed a draft transportation network, and since last time, since we had the big listening session in the charrette, and so we are making recommendations about locations for intersections improvements, where there potentially needs to be some changes to the roadway network. We took a lot of things into account when we were making these recommendations, but of utmost importance was our friends doing land use, because how the land is being used currently and how it will be used in the future influences the type of transportation recommendations that we need to make, so that like issues of congestion are addressed and are thought through in the way that we're building out the network, or opportunities for more connectivity if that is a stronger grid at times. If that makes sense, with the street grid, the network for streets is a little bit more defined and fleshed out so that it is a little bit easier to walk around or to get around by bike in designated areas. And the district designation, I think, is so helpful because it was so important for us to understand from the community's perspective of the nature and the context of it being a rural area. Rural area really matters to who Beulah is in terms of its identity and like the place that it actually is. So we want to be sensitive to that and the type of recommendations we made. And I'm going to pass it over to Richard, who might get just really briefly into a little bit more details along those lines. But I want to make a plug for you all to come talk to us after folks have made, little presentations, because we made a go at what the network could potentially be, but we want to hear from you all. How are we doing? Are we off the mark? Like, this is very much in draft form. We can change it. And report back next time how we've listened and heard and made amendments to the network. So thank you.
Yeah, and real brief. So we've looked at a couple of things. We've looked at what's out there right now infrastructure-wise. We've looked at the safety issues, so crashes and things like that, as well as the places that we're examining, parks, schools, making sure that we're getting good connectivity to that. And then we do a bunch of complicated things, and we've developed some recommendations very broadly and kind of hierarchy, like it's a hierarchy going from the most intense to the least. But as you look at the boards, they are at a 40,000 foot level, so we are not even talking about specific recommendations or anything like that. This is just an overall vision of it. But basically, we've organized it into, we've got the roadway projects, courtesy of FDOT and the county mostly. So those are just showing where the roadways are already being programmed and planned to be expanded or improved in other ways. We have the complete streets overhauls, which are not a one-size-fits-all designation. Complete streets by itself encompasses so much. What we do, for example, Mobile Highway towards Alabama, as a complete street will look very different than what you would recommend on Pine Forest Road or anything you would do in the city of Pensacola. So those are going to be things where we're looking for all modes. We're looking to have very safe, separated facilities like paths, things like that, making sure the intersections along that are improved to be safe for all modes. And then we have our bikeway and sidewalk. And when we say bikeway, we don't necessarily mean like bike lanes. We're thinking things can include neighborhood bikeways, which include traffic calming elements, things like that, as well as sidewalk, which is important to access the amenities. And then we have some sidewalk-only improvements in and around the neighborhoods to make sure that from the main roads, from the main corridors, you can get into the neighborhood or to the park, things like that. And so those are all on the board, and we've overlaid the districts on top of that so you can kind of see where some of those character changes may occur on the network as well with our recommendations. And so now I'll pass it back to Javier.
Thank you. Richard hit upon something, a very important principle that's guiding and will help guide the development of the master plan. And it's the complete street approach to design. Richard made a very good statement that complete streets don't fit, they're not standard. They are contextual, meaning that what a proposed roadway section for Beulah could be very different from the one that we could be proposing for 9 Mile Road. But it's the essence of the elements that go within the public realm, that go within the streets, that being lanes, travel lanes, turn lanes, medians, infrastructure, lighting, street trees, street furniture, paths, sidewalks. Those elements make a complete street, but not all of them need to be in a certain location. So that's part of the evaluation that we'll start doing in this next step for each district as to what kind of a cross-section of roadways fits best within the district itself. So thank you for bringing that up. So now I'd like to introduce Lynn. Lynn is our economics guru. She will work through her the method to her madness on the population projections and some fun facts relative to the economic profile of the area.
Thank you. Hi. You know, it's a little out of context to look at our population projections on these boards. So we have to go back to the beginning of our vision project where we did a full economic profile because we knew how important it was to understand who is Beulah. So we looked at, and we know that the average age of a person who lives in Beulah is 44 years old. We know that your median household income is $76,000. That's very high in the state of Florida. We know what you like. We did tapestry analysis of the people in Beulah. And so once we had all that information, the county said, well, we want to know what the population may be in 2045. So what we did is we took standard industry analysis tools that every economist uses, and we applied them to the current population, and which is always based on the U.S. Census. That's where they start those numbers from, is the 2020 U.S. Census. And then you have these economic analysts who come in and they put their algorithms in there and they tell us what we can look at for the state of Florida. So what we know that the state of Florida has done is have gone from a tremendous population boom in the 1950s, and our annual rate of growth in the 1950s reached 7% annually in the state of Florida. That has leveled down. It's now about 1.8% throughout the state of Florida. So then the University of Florida came in and said, well, we're going to help you out. We're going to do some more projections. So we pulled that analysis in also. So we took 3 different analysis of population growth for the state of Florida, broke them down into the counties, which is Escambia. We have the numbers from the University of Florida for Escambia's growth, and then we broke that down into what Beulah could look like. So I drive around and I see all these houses coming up and I see all these permits that Javier's team has pulled together, and I see that you can actually, according to Wright, build 56,000 units in this area. That's a whole lot of residential dwelling units. 10,000 people is about what we're showing is the increase to 2045. But here's what's going to affect that 2%, because I was talking with Ms. Blackwell earlier, and she said, well, we just see that it's growing faster. Well, it is. Your growth has gone, and we show it in our report, that your growth has really gone about 20-30%, but that's not annually. So that's from your base. There's a few things that are going to affect that growth. One is your natural population growth with births and deaths, okay? The second one is immigration and migration. And that's very important in the state of Florida, but it's also, immigration is important because of Naval Air Station, because you have a lot of employees coming in from overseas those are immigration numbers that will change that population. Another big factor are economic conditions. And so the big thing that's sitting right here in Beulah's backyard is Navy Fed. So that their projections for job increases, if they continue along those lines, you're going to see big spikes in the population growth. That's something we can't account for if we take pure straight book analysis. And then you have housing. Is housing available? If housing is available and it's affordable, people are going to move into an area. If it's not available, they can't find a place to live, well, then they're going to go someplace where they can. So housing is one of those big conditions that affects population growth. And then the last one is quality of life. Do you have the amenities here? Do you have that beautiful conservation area that we just talked about that adds so much to the Beulah district or community, the Beulah community? So that's one of the things also that's a big factor in population growth or decline. So it goes both ways. So I hope maybe I have put a little bit of clarification on the straight numbers, which you can see, but you always have to take those with good planning and good long-range planning that talks about roads and transportation and how are we going to plan for that if all that occurs. So.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Just a brief summary as to how we've gotten here, what we've gotten here relative to findings. We've estimated district boundaries. We've identified the opportunities and constraints. We've identified community preferences. That includes mobility, trails, housing stock, all sorts of things that are detailed in each individual district board. What are the next steps? We will come back and visit you all sometime in April, probably the fourth week of April. And at that time, we will present you with our initial concept designs for each district. Take into account roadway improvements, connectivity, location of potential activity zones, buffering, setbacks, roadway improvements for each individual district. And with that, we'll also create some potential implementation guidelines, such as amending the comprehensive plan to allow for this, amending the land use plan to allow for that, things of that nature. And it's going to be initially what we intend to do is to have the first half of it, we make the presentations for each district. In the second half, we'll break out into breakout sessions and analyze each district and receive input from y'all. And then based on that, we'll go back, incorporate things that make sense, and then start formulating a final draft of the plan itself. Well, again, I thank you for y'all's attendance tonight. I'm still very excited over the plan, the opportunities that we're creating here, and look forward to y'all's attendance in April, meeting yet to be announced. But at that time, we'll break it down for each individual district. We'll look at the, we'll look at the population numbers and see and provide you some background information. We'll have Lynn look at that. Where's Lynn? There she is back there. So explain that a bit more and go from there. So thank you.